the time, I would hope that we were going to get an update or talk to somebody. They got to get him out of the ring.
Please get an ambulance. One alone to darkness, Sullivan, come forth, my son. The only want for me is to take the nature.
My name is Bob Bamber and welcome to the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast. We're going back in the time machine to May of 1995, a Volume 1 of this month's show. Volume 2 is a WWF show looking at In Your House. Volume 3 is ECW. This is Volume 1. Welcoming firstly Chris White. Chris, hello.
Hi Bob, how you doing?
Very well. And a return, long time no speak, to Craig Wilson. Craig, hello.
Greetings.
Craig, we will catch up with you properly at the end of the show, but we'll start off with the news. Craig.
Yep, so Ric Flair returned to in-ring action on the losing side at Slamboree. He teamed with Vader and lost to the team of Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. The heels regained their heat thanks to a post-match attack that saw Ric Flair blocking the figure four on Randy's father, Angelo, who was at ringside after his Hall of Fame induction. The quartet will headline the next two pay-per-views with Flair against Savage at the Great American Bash in June and Hogan facing off against Vader at Bash in the Beach in July.
Elsewhere, on a largely uneventful evening, the Nasty Boys won the tag titles off the Harlem Heat, and Arn Anderson ended Alex Wright's undefeated record. We also saw the genesis of what seems to be a new stable called the Dungeon of Doom. This will be led by Kevin Sullivan and include Avalanche, Kamala, and a 7-foot wrestler, Paul White, who appeared briefly on this show.
Slamboree is WCW's annual Legends celebration and included their Hall of Fame inductions along with a Legends match that was shown in black and white. While Dick Mordock and Chief Wahoo Mcdaniel had by any standards a very poor match, the company inducted 7 people into their Hall of Fame, including Dusty Rhodes, Terry Funk and Angelo Poffo.
The big story away from the pay-per-view was the walkout of Steve Austin at a TV taping at the beginning of May. Austin was asked a job to the Renegade but refused. Further persuasion didn't work and Austin ended up leaving the building. A couple of days later, at the same set of tapings, Austin was talked into doing it by head booker Ric Flair. It's believed Flair offered to reform the Hollywood Blondes in return.
One of the most anticipated collisions in a long time will take place next Sunday. Let's hear from Ric Flair Vader with Arn Anderson about the tag team match at Slamboree.
Hogan, you stuck your foot in your mouth this time. You ducked out of the pan and into the fire. Ladies and gentlemen, if you will, let me introduce the 3 greatest wrestlers to ever step in the square circle. Have you heard? Have you heard of the Fab Five of basketball? Well, ladies and gentlemen, you're looking at the Big Three. Arn Anderson, the Enforcer. Vader, the Intimidator. And Mr. Ric Flair himself, the greatest world champion that's ever lived. Hogan, Hulkamania, the greatest test, May 21st, 1995. Brother, you come ready, you come prepared, bring whomever you want. Because the Big Three is showing up live.
You may fill out your own home turf. I know he's got you brainwashed, Savage. But Hogan, if you have told the Renegade, I know he's young and he's dumb and he's strong and he's stupid, and you've told him, yeah, eat those vitamins, eat clean, train in that gym. We can take these 3 guys. He's not telling you about that dangerous element of surprise that we're going to bring to you. Understand one thing. You stick your head in. I'm going to drive your head in that mat with a DDT, and you're going to end that match in about 5-6 minutes.
Yeah! That's right. Enjoy it! Quiet it! It's the last tango, boys. It's the big one. It's Sunday night. Slamboree. When you talk about legends, you talk about us. When you talk about life, you talk about us. It's Sunday night. You belong to us. Woo!
We start with WCW Saturday night on May the 6th. Dallas Page is out with Max Muscle and the Diamond Doll looking to buy a car. He buys cars for both Max and the Doll before picking up a Lamborghini for himself. The $240,000 price tag, nothing for the newly rich Page. We're in the midst of the US title tournament. Randy Savage defeated the Butcher in his opening round match. He will face Stunning Steve Austin in round 2. After the match, Flair and Anderson come out to jump Savage, but the Renegade comes out. Then Vader comes out wielding a chair, but Hogan blindsides him and faces keep the heels at bay. Hogan cuts a promo after the match and says their secret weapon at Slamboree is none other than Angelo Poffo, Randy's father. On WCW main event the following evening, Paul Orndorff defeats Johnny B. Bad using the ropes in the US title tournament match. On to May 13th for WCW Saturday night, we cut to Randy Savage chatting to his father on a lake. Angelo says that deep down Flair and Vader know that they cannot defeat the Monster Maniacs. He warns that they might have a plan and that Randy should be cautious. Big Brother Rogers was disqualified in his US title tournament match against Alex Wright by chucking him over the top rope. Wright advanced to face Ric Flair. Sting came out at the end of the segment to run off Bubba. May the 14th on main event saw the Butcher face off against Kevin Sullivan. For some reason this was seen as a preview of their match at Slamboree, which will also be a singles match. Butcher is now going by the name of the Man with No Name. No explanation has been given for this. Shockingly, the match ends when Avalanche attack the Man with No Name and the pair double teamed him. Ric Flair made his in-ring return, in the US at least, by defeating the Patriot in the opening round of the US title tournament. Surprisingly, perhaps, Flair required interference of Arn Anderson to get the job done in a very long match. On May the 20th, Eric Bischoff is on the golf course looking for some comments with DDP and the Diamond Doll. We briefly find out that Doll's real name is Kimberly before DDP arrives and is unhappy with Bischoff, questioning the Doll. We then see the pair along with Max Muscle on the course. Max hits the ball so hard at one point it disintegrates. Randy Savage is on the beach with his dad, Angelo. He tells Randy not to trust anybody. Savage decides that he's going to swim to the Bayfront Centre, so he, along with a number of other beachgoers, jump into the sea as the segment ends. In the main event of Saturday night, Sting defeats Paul Orndorff in the US title tournament match.
Just seen him in action. Very impressive, I must say, here on the main event. Come on in, if you would, Earl of Eaton and Lord Stephen Regal.
Sound the horns, the British are coming. Can you believe the idiocy of WCW allowing those overweight oafs, the Nasty Boys, to have another title shot? Are you people complete idiots? I mean, the thing that I'm hoping for is that these four undereducated, complete lunatics beat each other to death. And you know who'll care? Not one single person, not even their lousy little filthy mothers will care what has happened to them. Myself and Robert are on a pledge from the Queen, and we intend to be the world's tag team champions. Robert, let's find something better.
And we come back. We will not start with WCW Slamboree. We've got to start with the main event that aired in the hour prior to the show. Lord Stephen Regal, Earl Robert Eaton, defeated Los Especialistas, a pair of Mexicans in the opener. Stunning Steve Austin won a squash. The Nasty Boys cut a promo on the stage, but then got laid out by Regal and Eaton, who attacked them with chairs. Ric Flair, Vader and Arn Anderson come out for a promo. Eric Bischoff comes out on the video wall and Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Angelo Poffo and Jimmy Hart arrive. Vader says that Hogan has to meet two people he's never met before and introduces him to his biceps. The segment comes across quite awkwardly with both parties talking over each other, but it seems like they're both up for a fight this evening. Craig Pittman wins a squash. We get an advert for the WCW Power Plant, their training centre. In a US title tournament match, Meng defeats Brian Pillman in a very decisive fashion to advance to the semi-finals. After the match, Road Warrior Hawk runs out and clears the ring of both Meng and Parker. Hawk and Meng stand off each other before being kept apart by various wrestlers and officials. During a promo by Hawk, Colonel Parker comes out with Nick Bockwinkel. Bockwinkel makes the match with Meng tonight, which pops the crowd. Bockwinkel does seem to confuse Hawk with Animal, though. And we move on to WCW Slamboree. Craig, kick us off with the results.
Yeah, in the opening match, the Nasty Boys of Brian Knobbs and Jerry Saggs defeated Harlem Heat to win the WCW World Tag Team Championships. Then Kevin Sullivan defeated the Man with No Name, formerly known as The Butcher. After that, there was the Legends match, which pitted Dick Mordock against Wahoo Mcdaniel, with Wahoo Mcdaniel triumphing in that one. Then the Great Muta defeated Paul Orndorff to retain the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. Arn Anderson then faced and defeated Alex Wright to retain the WCW World Television Championship. Meng then fought Road Warrior Hawk to a double countout. Then we cut to the WCW Hall of Fame inductions, which included Wahoo McDaniel, Angelo Popo, Terry Funk, Antonio Inuko, Dusty Rhodes, Gordon Soley and Big John Studd. Sting defeated Big Bubba Rogers in a lights out match, and in the main event, Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage, with Jimmy Hart and the Renegade at ringside, defeated Ric Flair and Vader, who had Arn Anderson in their corner.
Chris, what do you think of this show?
Well, I hate to be so negative right off the bat, but I really didn't enjoy it. It had, the card didn't look too bad, but after watching it, it just had no right being a pay-per-view. I thought it was terrible, really. It would have been maybe passable as a TV special or a clash or something like that, but it had so few positives. It really did.
Craig?
Getting this evening's podcast off to a very consensual start, I'm very much in agreement with Chris. It was a really, really poor show. It didn't help by what came across as a very slow and plodding start to the event. Usually want sort of a quick match to start with and then get into the meat and bones, but it just got off to a very slow start and struggled to pick up, and struggled in fact and failed to pick up afterwards.
I don't know whether it's just 18 months of being worn down by WCW pay-per-views, but I didn't think this was quite as bad as you guys did. That's not to say I came away with a positive impression, but I thought there were certainly some decent matches, certainly no better. But I think for once we can say that WCW booking here was stronger than it usually is, which was a positive. Craig, me and you back in the day, sat through WCW shows, not only were as bad as this, but also featured some far worse booking and match finishes than we got here.
Oh, absolutely. There was no dusty finishes. So, if you are going to find a silver lining, then it is the fact that there was no sort of preposterous finishes. It was just a little bit of a chore this event felt. You didn't really want to watch it. You sort of felt a big grudge to continue with it.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. But no, I say in terms of what I thought, when you look at the show in terms of what they moved forward, I thought they did quite a good job. But yeah, I think it would be fair to say that you didn't miss much on this card from an action and an in-ring point of view. Anyway, we start with Eric Bischoff, who's deputising for Tony Schiavone, who's not there. And we open up with the Nasty Boys versus Harlem Heat with Sister Sherry. Sags walks out alone. Knobbs is still setting the attack from the pre-show, so he's not out for the start. And Sags will take on the Harlem Heat 2-on-1. Sag gets the best of the early offense on Booker T, hitting a clothesline that sends Booker flipping over onto the mat, which pops the crowd. Sags then charges at Booker in the corner before taking on Stevie Ray and hitting a double DDT. Then hits Sherry off the apron, which livens up the crowd. Sag goes to the top and drops a fist. He's dominating the match despite the numbers game at this stage, and takes it to Sherry and knocks her off the apron. Sherry gets him on the outside and takes multiple shots. Ray drives him into the guardrail. Booker T hits a jumping scissor kick with the Heat fully in control, then hits a senton from the top rope. Sags is laid out in the ring and the duo are toying with him at this stage. Sags finally manages to hit a pile driver out from nowhere, then outrubs Brian Knobbs, who's perhaps a bit too speedy given his injuries. That said, they said that Knobbs had left two doctors laying backstage. Knobbs gets a hot tag and runs amok. Sherry climbs to the top rope. Knobbs catches her jumping off of it, drives her into the mat, and then dumps her over the top rope to the outside with a very vicious looking bump. Knobbs then hits the running power slam. Sags drops the elbow from the top, and we have new tag team champions. The Blue Bloods come out into the R-Weight in suits. The Nasty Boys do a post-match promo saying that the Blue Bloods want to be number one contenders. They've got it. Craig, what did you think of this opener?
I liked it at the start. I liked Sags sort of taking it, him fighting the two off at once. But then the sort of middle period I just thought was quite dull when the pair of them overpowered it, and then it finished on a reasonably hot finish. I have to say it did include Knobbs hitting what looked like one of the worst bulldogs I've ever seen, and then as you alluded to in your review there, a very sick throw over the top rope of Sherry, which just looked very dangerous. So it started well, finished well. It was just the middle that I had the sort of biggest issue with.
Yeah, if there's one thing I've learned from this show, it's don't underestimate Sherry's ability to take a ridiculously over-the-top bump for someone in her position, and this certainly fit that bill. Chris, your thoughts?
It was okay, but no better. These two teams are no strangers in like the pay-per-views leading up to this one, are they? They faced each other quite a lot, and compared to the matches I'd seen between the two teams, this didn't compare to the ones I have seen. The handicap angle was okay, and like maybe they did do that like to mix it up a bit, make it feel a bit more fresh. But I didn't think it was particularly good, really. It was okay.
No, I mean, of all my problems with this show, and I'm sure it will be reflected on what you guys say later on as well, this wasn't really one of them. I actually kind of feel like this match could have been the opening match of what could have gone on to have been a far better show, depending on what followed it. But in terms of, again, this is kind of this is how I summed up the show. The action wasn't great, but the actual storytelling was pretty good. The 2-on-1, handicap attack. Sags gets the best of the early going, and then we have that, alright, that perhaps flat middle period, but you kind of had to, that's heel 2-on-1 advantage by the book. It's, they're toying with them, they're taunting, they've got the match won, they're just being cocky and complacent. That made sense, even if it wasn't brilliant to watch. And then Knobs came out, whipped up the crowd, did some cool stuff with Sherry. I thought this was pretty good. Craig, I mean, what do you think about the Nasty Boys? We've got them as tag champs now, and they're baby faces, and I'm presuming last time you were on the show they were probably heels. What do you think of them in this role? Because I think they're pretty good.
The crowd were into them, so I mean, on that simple basis, then they're doing something right. I mean, I don't necessarily mind the Nasty Boys. I mean, they're very much a case of you get what you expect you will get from them. And that's the sort of same for the match itself. Harlem Heat versus Nasty Boys. I mean, it was the sort of match you'd absolutely expect. I think they're fine in a babyface role. I think it was very much aided to with Brian Knobbs' run in at the end, which, like you said earlier on, was very much not playing up to any injuries that he had. I think they're fine in a face role. I'm not terribly convinced by the strength of Harlem Heat as heel team, but I think Nasty Boys are a fine enough sort of mid-upper card tag team.
No, I'd agree with that. I mean, I think, some people might be wondering why they've moved away, into the Nasty Boys against the Blue Bloods so quickly, given that, theory goes that Harlem Heat should have another shot. I think the short answer to that is, as Chris alluded to, is that these guys have basically been fighting each other for the last 6 months. And now you've done the title change. While it might logically make sense to have another match, I think that it was right to move them on. But no, I think the Nasty Boys are doing really well to get the most out of their kind of quite limited talent. They're not great promos, they're not great talkers, they're not great in the ring. But they have something, and particularly as, last time we saw, I think when they were heels, I probably would have balked at the idea of them being baby faces. But they're not bad, and Craig, as you said, the crowd was certainly into them. Chris, any further thoughts on this before we move on?
Not really. I do think maybe you're being taking it a bit easy on it. It was okay at best, really. But I'd agree with what Craig said about the Nasty Boys playing baby faces. I mean, at the end of the day, getting the reaction from the crowd is kind of what that role's all about, and they certainly do that better than most other people, on the card, really, all the way through. So, yeah.
And I get the sense, and we will find out as we move on, I get the sense that the umbrage with the first half of this show won't ultimately lie with this opener as we move on.
Kevin Sullivan, my friend, come on in. Tonight you're going to be facing the man with no friends, no name, not too much. Just a second, Kevin, please. Kevin, this man has not been normal. Normal, perhaps a bad choice of words. Whenever I talk about Kevin Sullivan, you're going to be facing the man formerly known as Butcher. That sounds like Prince for some reason.
I'm not afraid.
What is it with you?
Gene, do you feel cold in here?
You are disoriented. I don't feel cold. No, it's warm. It's 85 degrees. Who are you kidding?
Butcher, or the man with no name, I told you not to show up here because it wasn't what I feared that was going to happen to you. It's what I fear that's going to happen to me. I haven't slept in the last 5 days. Butcher, I'm going to take everything. Are you sure you're not cold?
You know, this may be the old story of what goes around comes around, because Kevin Sullivan, you've ruined a lot of people's lives as of late. I don't have to tell these fans. I certainly don't have to tell you. Look what you did to this man. He's now totally useless.
The whole problem was with the butcher, or the man with no name, is that he still believes in Hulkamania. This Hulkamania that you really believe. All you have to do is say your prayers, take your vitamins, and believe in yourself, and things will be right. Well, butcher, man with no name, it ain't gonna happen. And Gene, there's something wrong with you if you don't think it's not cold in here.
Well, it's not cold, gentlemen. It's not cold in here, is it? It's warm. It's maybe 90 in here. You're going the wrong way. That's the men's room.
So Kevin Sullivan, who's backstage with Mean Gene Oakland, ahead of his match with the Butcher, who's now called the Man with No Name. But yes, for the sake of brevity, I'm going to call him the Butcher because it's stupid otherwise. Sullivan says there's a problem that Butcher still believes in Hulkamania. Sullivan also keeps claiming that it's cold and generally doesn't seem to be all there. And it's a bit all over the place. Craig, quickly on this, what do you think of this? I mean, it's difficult to discuss this now given what's going to happen in a minute. But Sullivan playing a bit wacky heel all over the place, convincing?
It just seemed a bit weird, and it was like, what are you doing? Type stuff. It was quite difficult to follow, and I don't think that Mean Gene was that good a foil in saying no, it's not cold, to Kevin Sullivan saying it's cold. It just didn't seem to. It just didn't work. Yeah,
I get the sense we can file this under. It made sense, even though it didn't make sense, or because it didn't make sense, just because of what follows.
It might have worked if Mean Gene had been more open to whatever they were hoping to achieve from this, rather than being like, yeah, no, Kevin, it's not cold at all. And it just, because of that, it just was like, what's going on here? Yeah. But Kevin Sullivan does play that role quite nicely. Anyway, we come to the match. The man formerly known as the Butcher, the Man with No Name, versus Kevin Sullivan. The two waste no time going at it. Butcher attacks Sullivan on the outside. Butcher does a 10 punch in the corner before going for an eye gouge. The action spills to the outside again, and the pair exchange chops. Butcher then hits a pile driver, but can only get a 2 count. Butcher then runs at Sullivan in the corner, but Sullivan gets out of the way and takes control, hitting a running knee, then a double stomp on Butcher's chest. Bizarrely, that's enough to win the match. So something quite significant after the match, but we will come to that in a second. Chris, your thoughts on this rather brief match?
I mean, maybe the fact it was so brief is somewhat of an excuse, but there's not really too much to talk about. It was a non-event, really. I didn't feel like I had a reason to care about the match, and I didn't really enjoy it, really. I feel like I'm being very negative in general, but it ended abruptly, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing.
Craig, Chris didn't feel like he had a reason to care, and I get the sense the people in the crowd didn't either.
And me. My notes ended with mercifully short, and at one point during this match, I just sort of started thinking of other things, such as, if he's the man with no name, who did he make the paychecks out to? And then I just quickly remembered that I didn't really care.
Yeah, no, that is at least a fair point, if nothing else. But yeah, there's going to become a common theme with the next 3 matches, perhaps 4, in that we've got a lot of baby faces who are not only not over, but don't seem to be all that keen on getting themselves over in front of a live crowd. That if there's one thing we can say about someone like Hacksaw Jim Duggan, for all of his faults, is that he has a very paint-by-numbers way of whipping a crowd up and getting them behind him. And we can line up Butcher with the guys that followed as guys who don't. And that doesn't help, because when the crowd are flat and the action's crap, there's really nothing to say. But the one thing I will say about this is that there are occasions in wrestling where when you're setting up for a big post-match angle, or perhaps something significant, you have kind of a period of nothing, and then we set to this.
Really had control of this contest for about 70 or 80% of the time. Oh, wait a minute. Look at that. Who is that? Oh, my goodness.
the bowels of New York City, to the Champs-Élysées in Paris, to the slums of Singapore, Hulkamaniacs, all wearing the red and the yellow, the army of the immortal Hulk Hogan.
What?
Grows.
Sullivan has gone into the people. He's getting out of here. He's terrified of that man, whoever that man is, or whatever he is.
One link, one alone, to darkness. Sullivan, come forth, my son.
We cut to the video wall to a bald guy who is Kamala in an underground setting. It looks quite cold. He cuts the promo that you would have just heard. Sullivan escapes into the crowd and the figure on screen tells Sullivan to come forth. Craig, this is the thing called the Dungeon of Doom that we referenced in the news. I haven't really got any opinion on it at the moment. It was just so bizarre, a bit like the Sullivan promo before the match. I don't know what I'm supposed to think.
I guess from my sort of professional background in public relations, you look at things and you're like, if you're left wondering what's actually going on, then it's not very successful. And I was left wondering what's going on.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, I get the sense that
I totally get that about this. I mean, you could look at Kevin Sullivan's history and just be like, what's this all about? But it just seemed really weird that the guy appeared on the main screen and Kevin Sullivan just disappeared through the crowd. There didn't seem to be any explanation. You sort of wanted the commentators to explain a little bit more of what was going on, and I think a lot of the failing of this segment, and I'd probably mark this down as a failing. As a failure, is the fact that they didn't really put across what was going on and why it was happening.
Chris?
It was just strange. Like some really weird old man in a cold cave moaning about Hulk Hogan and Hulkamania. Like, what's Hulkamania ever done to him? Like, he's in a cave. Like, just really strange, and not in a good strange, not in a mysterious, I want to see, I wonder where this is going. It's really obvious where this is going, and I'm not really sure I want to be on board for the ride.
No, I'd agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I can forgive the announcers not really elaborating on what happened, given that, the idea is it's meant to have come out of nowhere. I'd also say, Craig, to what you said in the sense that I think part of the design was that you are meant to confuse people, but I think the hope is that you confuse them in a way that intrigues them. But as I think Chris said, I'm not sure they did. I'm not sure the crowd care enough about Kevin Sullivan or Kamala or Paul White. Although Paul White's over 7 foot and he'll appear later in the show. He wasn't in this bit. I'm not sure there was enough here to hook people in as like, oh, okay, I actually need to know more about this. Go on, Craig.
I totally agree with that. The idea that if you had sort of people that the fans cared about, they'd be like, kind of keen to see where this goes. But instead you're just being like, you're sort of left wondering what's the point of all of this. So you've already got the angle off to quite a sort of negative footing rather than, I wonder where this is going. You're left thinking, what are they possibly doing with this? So I think it's sort of doomed from the outset, but we'll see in the coming months how badly doomed it is. Yes, we will. We certainly will. The one thing before we move on, the one thing I will say is that the visual of Sullivan kind of leaving the ring, going up through the crowd into the stands, the wide angle on that, and Sullivan like almost looking like he was under control by someone else, and I know that's some very, very advanced storytelling, and I wouldn't go there. I thought the visual was quite good. That would be my one positive for all this. And also, I would also say that I am more interested in Kevin Sullivan now than I was before the match. That is to say that I wasn't interested in before the match.
So in a way, there are a couple of positives, but yeah, there's a lot of missing while they hit this mark. I will say that. But I guess we'll see. You know, it's the first of X number of chapters, and they don't always make sense first up. Anyway, we come backstage and Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage cut a promo. Hogan eventually invites Savage to enable him to, quote, smell the Slim Jim breath, which Savage obliges. And we cut to the Legends match. It's Dick Murdoch versus Chief Wahoo Mcdaniel, and it's gone black and white. Yes, they have literally turned the screen black and white for this Legend match. And we've also got Gordon Soley on commentary. Dick Murdoch, for those who are keeping score, is making his second pay-per-view appearance in 1995 after appearing on the Royal Rumble. The pair lock up. McDaniel does an arm drag, then another. Murdoch takes control in the corner. The pace of the match is very slow. McDaniel hits a chop, which lines up the crowd. The pair exchange blows. Murdoch drags McDaniel to the apron, then hits him with multiple elbows. Murdoch climbs to the top, grabs McDaniel by his hair, then drives his back into the mat with his knee. Murdoch drops an elbow for a 2 count, but the Chief hits a chop, and that gets enough for a quick 3 count. Chris?
Oh, I get the idea of a Legends match. Like, that's fine in itself. That idea is quite nice. But at what point does it just become embarrassing for the guys working the match? Like, it was so slow, and then just a very regular chop just is enough for a pin. It's just a bit of a joke, really, to be on a national level pay-per-view. I'm not saying they didn't try hard, because clearly they did, but at what point is it just more sort of offensive than doing any positive whatsoever?
Craig?
Sort of difficult not to really agree. It's a Legends match featuring 2 guys that sort of really struggle to fight their way into the category of being a legend. It's a very slow-paced match. It has a nondescript finish, and the fact that it was just in black and white was just a little bit weird. For me, despite all that criticism, it does have the sole positive of this event for me, and that's Gordon Soley teaming with Bobby Heenan to call a match.
Yeah. I would add it being in black and white as the only positives from this match. We go back 2 years to Slamboree 93, which is technically the genesis of, this project. The podcast started a few months later. Certainly the first full show I watched. And that show included Dory Funk Jr. against Nick Bockwinkel. Nick Bockwinkel, of course, now has Commissioner fame. And yeah, we're talking about 2 genuine legends there. Dory Funk, NWA World Champion. Craig, did Bockwinkel win the NWA title? I know he's an AWA guy. But Craig?
I'm pretty sure he did. I don't know if you're asking me that question in terms of going to check this, but no, I'm pretty sure he did. But he is best remembered for his time in AWA. Absolutely.
Yeah, AWA in Japan. Either way, it's not that important. But two guys known for the ring work and known for being genuinely big stars. And then we come to this match, and this is Dick Murdoch, bit fat, not particularly. I don't particularly strike me as a guy who was ever a great worker back in the day. People feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And Chief Wahoo Mcdaniel, another guy who didn't strike me as the kind of guy who was a great worker back in the day. Both a bit fat, both working this kind of match that I don't even think this match would have been a good match 20 years ago. You've always got to watch matches from back in the day and kind of appreciate that, this might not work in the modern day era, but, if it drew back in the past, then it was still quite effective. I don't think this was that. And yeah, just a miss, a genuine miss.
A swinging a miss, absolutely.
Yeah, and again, I think the only positives were, one, the black and white thing was certainly different. And it was certainly memorable in a way that this match wouldn't have been for otherwise. And Soley was a nice touch. But otherwise, just a proper... And the worst thing, Chris, about it all was that the crowd were absolutely dead.
In terms of calling this a Legends match, it didn't come across like the crowd really knew who these people were. Just really, really poor all round.
Yeah, and this And the previous match, and to a degree the next match, kind of comes back to what I say about the opener, in that at least we have the Nasty Boys, one, trying to be baby faces in an overt way that these guys weren't being, and two, we had a crowd that, you know, judging by the opener, certainly wanted to be loud. You know, you'll go into certain places where you'll get guys like Jim Duggan and the Nasty Boys, guys who will quite overtly and not very subtly try and whip up the crowd. These, you know, and they got a reaction out of this crowd, and these guys didn't, and that I think is to a disservice. And yeah, I think this match was awful. I think that's the only way of summing that up. And we're back in living colour, and it's Big Bubba Rogers backstage. He talks up his victory over Sting from March. And we move on to the IWGP Championship match. It's the Great Muta versus Paul Orndorff. Orndorff gets into an argument with the referee as the match begins. Orndorff and Muta exchange some technical holds to begin the match. Muta does the slit sign across his throat. Orndorff motions to him that he can kiss his ass. Orndorff does a spinning back kick and sends Muta to the outside. Orndorff escapes as a sleeper into an arm lock. Muta hits a lovely drop kick and then drops a quick elbow. Muta then locks in a head scissors. Orndorff fights out and hits a back suplex, then sends Muta over the top rope to the outside, no disqualification for those keeping count, before choking Muta with a camera cable, still no DQ. Orndorff locks in a neck submission. Muta rallies, goes for a drop kick, but Orndorff holds onto the ropes. Muta gains some control and drops an elbow from the second rope. Orndorff sets for a pile driver, Muta hits a backdrop, then hits a lovely fast moonsault from the top rope, and that's enough for the victory. Craig?
I think the worst thing about that review that you've just done is the miscalling of moves, because of course you refer to drop kicks, and of course that's a jump double kick, whilst the spin kick for Muta is also a jump back side kick.
Yes, referring to Eric Bischoff on commentary. Chris, I know you had a bit on this as well.
Yeah, the jump double kick with like pauses and all, just really poor, and like it was a reflection of what was going on in the ring.
I have two responses to that. One, Bischoff's not wrong. It is called the drop kick, but jump double kick does very much fit the description of what Muta was doing. And secondly, we are in an era led by Vince McMahon on commentary in the WWF, and at least Bischoff was trying to call moves. That is a tick in the box.
It is an absolute tick in the box, but what isn't a tick in the box is it being 1995 and Paul Orndorff getting a 15-minute match in a pay-per-view.
Well, yes. We will come on to the match. I mean, this was a very weird pairing. I mean, this match hadn't particularly been hyped up on TV beforehand, so much so that I kind of forgotten about it, if they even mentioned it all that much. And so Muta came out, and I think I knew that bit was coming. And then it was like, Orndorff? That wouldn't have been the guy I put him with. But yeah, this was a really strange match in the sense that it almost seems like they were setting up Muta to have a bad match. They put him with a guy who can't particularly work well against his style. He's not young enough or quick enough to do that. And also they certainly worked the match in a way that suggested it wasn't even set up to get Muta over. Which I guess, you know, you've got a Japanese guy in your promotion for one match, maybe your ultimate goal isn't to do that. But yeah, go on, Chris, what were your thoughts on the match?
It wasn't, well, it was probably, for me, the best match out of the four we've seen so far, but that's more of a reflection on the show than any sort of quality this had. It was really slow. There were a lot of chin locks. Like, it was, like, we were sort of being told Muta was this, like, high-flying martial artist, and he was about 4 inches taller than Orndorff. It was a bit, like, it just didn't really work.
Craig?
Yeah, it just seemed like a sort of clash. Like Chris says, the description of the match and the way it came about just didn't seem to work, and it just seemed very wrestled central, and it sort of continued the theme of the pay-per-view being just quite boring, because I mean, great Muta, as great as he might be, clearly doesn't really work very well with Paul Orndorff, and I mean, house show circuits are the sort of things that are designed to iron out kinks in guys working together, and I mean, there were more kinks than anything else in this one.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder how good a match Muta could have had with, say, Brian Pillman. That I think would have been something that could have worked together a lot more strongly. But yeah, again, a weird pairing. I mean, that being said, if my history is correct, and Craig, this was the last show you did, I think Muta was at Spring Stampede last year against Austin, and I remember that match not being very good either. Although that being said, that was the worst match on a fantastic show.
I remember that as well. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Whereas this was just a pretty poor match and a pretty poor card.
And Craig, we've also got the thing where, and again, this comes back to the man with no name. This comes back to Wahoo Mcdaniel as well. We've got Muta, and this also crosses back to Antonio Inoki about 6 months ago. We've got Muta in the kind of babyface role. And it just doesn't work in front of an American audience. I don't know whether if you were in front of an audience that knew who he was, or maybe he was put in a match against an opponent that one could, because Orndorff wasn't particularly great at drawing heat here, which surprised me a little bit. But yeah, I kind of felt like this entire thing was set up, and maybe this isn't the strangest theory in the world. It feels like, Craig, this entire thing was set up not to get the best out of Muta, because there were so many things logistically they got wrong.
I think the point that you make, Bob, is absolutely right. I mean, we saw him taking on, we saw Great Muta taking on Steve Austin last year, and we just weren't sort of, we were hardly running out of sort of superlatives to describe the match, and then for the year down the line, we're very critical of the match. Maybe it's not a case of, maybe it's a case of his style doesn't resonate with the Western audience, but I don't think it's going to if you stick him in a match with someone such as Paul Orndorff at this late stage in his career. No,
I mean, I think it could work, but I kind of feel like you'd have to change about 8 things about this match to make it work, from a different opponent, to a different style of match, to probably having a lot more build for Muta beforehand. You know, I mean, the WCW have been working a lot in Japan in the last kind of 6 months or so. Maybe in the weeks leading up to the show, get some clips of him in Japan that you can use on your TV. Maybe show a match or two if they'll let you use one of those. Just so the audience that goes in aren't completely blind to him. Because, and I saw this with Inoki as well, in that I don't get the sense that the Japanese babyface style in Japan is all that showy. And I haven't seen a lot of Japanese wrestling, so, you know, people who know more about it, feel free to correct me on that. But I don't get the sense that in Japan you go in as a babyface and you try and whip up the crowd and you do a nasty boy style thing. I get the sense you go in and you become a babyface by your actions and your mannerisms and things like that. And so Muta, to almost as much as you might think I'm just baiting WCW, I think Muta almost to his fault as well, trying to come in and just trying to be the Japanese version of him, perhaps was a mistake. I think you've got to be a bit more emotive. But yeah, and the other thing I'll say is that as you guys referred to, this was a 15-minute match. I know my match review wasn't all that long. This was a long match and not a lot happened. But his moonsault was nice, and that will be the positive that I will end the match review on. We go backstage from me, Gene Oakland. He's backstage with Arnson, Ric Flair, and Vader. Flair says he's going to stand back and admire Vader do the damage in the main event. Terry Funk is here to accept his entry into the WCW Hall of Fame. This was just an interview before the ceremony. He's much more somber and babyface than we've seen in most of this project. Craig, this was interesting. I don't know whether it's a year and 18 months of Funk in Wild Maniac in ECW and the bits we've seen in WCW as well. Very odd seeing Funk as the respectful, straight up and down babyface.
Yeah, it was a little bit different, which sort of made the segment a little bit more memorable. I thought it sort of caught you off guard a little bit. I quite liked it.
Yeah, he would have been really good in the Legends match.
Yep, I agree. And the fact that he'd have still been able to work a reasonably competent match regardless of opposition.
Yeah. No, I get the sense that Funk, even working a ye olde match, would have done some stuff that would have got everyone interested. It might have just been a small thing with the referee or just shouting at some of the fans. Although, dare I say, I don't know whether Terry Funk, a guy who's still trying to draw in the main event in Japan, wants to be shot in black and white. I will say that. But we move on to Das Wunderkid, Alex Wright against Arn Anderson for the TV title. Wright starts with a headlock, then locks in another one on the mat. Wright twice manages to fool Anderson by not doing the usual running off the ropes, then hits an enziguri as he takes control early in the match. Anderson goes for an enziguri of his own, but Wright ducks and goes for an STF. Anderson escapes to the outside and regroups. Wright's having none of it and hits the tope. Anderson charges by the ring post, but Wright ducks and Double A cracks his arm off the post. Wright gets back in the ring and starts working on Arn's arm. Anderson finally gets a foothold in the match, hits a trademark spine buster to gain some parity. He then starts choking Wright by the ropes. Wright rallies with a suplex, then hits a lovely high angle drop kick from the top rope. Anderson fakes a left hand, Wright ducks, and Anderson uses that to hit the DDT and pick up the victory. Chris?
This was the best match so far of the night by a mile. This was like, there's not really anything wrong with this. I like the finish a lot. I thought it was quite creative. There was good storytelling. I don't really have any negatives at all. I really enjoyed it.
No, just to reiterate the finish, I think rattles through it there. Essentially, Anderson goes to kind of fakes a punch to Wright, who then ducks. And as Wright ducks kind of towards Anderson's left arm, Anderson uses that momentum and cinches in the DDT and nails it. Really good spot. Craig, sorry.
I thought this was a perfectly watchable match. I mean, it's not going to make any sort of end-of-year lists of the best matches of the year or the best pay-per-view matches of the year. And I mean, if this had sort of just been on TV, it'd have been fine. But no, you have to be overtly critical to hate on this match. I thought it was all right.
Yeah,
a passable match.
Yeah, again, a bit like the opener. It wasn't great, but I get the sense it could have been part of what could have been seen as a far better show. I agree. This a bit like the owner, in another sense as well. The action wasn't actually all that good, but I thought they told a very interesting story. You know, the idea that Wright, the young upstart, was trying to kind of play Anderson at his own game, you know, kind of dominating the early goings, not with Wright's athleticism or his agility, but with kind of rest holds and that kind of thing to try and wear Anderson down. And I also thought that Bischoff and Heenan did a really good job on commentary, kind of ramming this kind of idea home. In terms of kind of the way Wright was trying to win the match. And yeah, like, the action was clean. We've again got the problem with another babyface that doesn't particularly act overtly babyface. Although that's kind of been a long-standing issue with Wright, and at least in the case of Arn Anderson, he's working with a heel that can more than compensate for that. And yeah, Anderson hit a lovely spine buster in this, and the finish was quite nice too. As I said, this match is significant for what we're going to in part discuss later on in terms of, obviously Alex Wright was undefeated going into this match, and now he's not. And basically there was the thought that, the Flair camp, the Flair side of it, the non-Hogan side of WCW wanted Wright to win the match and the title, but the Hogan kind of group wanted Anderson to retain so that Renegade can beat Anderson for the title next month, which, as I understand it at the moment, is still the plan. So yeah, there's a fair bit amount more going on to this, but the match itself was fine without being exceptional. But I like the story that they told. And Wright loses his undefeated streak, but this was Wright's best match in WCW. Now, okay, against Arn Anderson, you'd kind of hope so. But no, he's improving, and one thing about this as well is that they had a very nice video package about these two before the start. And WCW production wise, in the last, I want to say 4 to 6 months, maybe the last kind of 3 or 4 pay-per-views, if you watch them in a line, maybe with a couple beforehand as well, it's kind of the last 6, I think you'll notice at this stage that their production values are certainly picking up. Not just in terms of like the equipment and the things they're doing and the staging and things like that, but I think also just the way they put together shows and how they package matches like this and things like that. Anyway, we move on to Meng with Conor Royal Parker against Road Warrior Hawk. Meng unloads on Hawk in the corner, hitting a series of kicks. Meng hits a pile driver and Hawk completely no-sells it, jumps straight to his feet. Hawk charges Meng in the corner but smashes his shoulder into the ring post. Hawk hits multiple boots but cannot gain control. Meng chops him to the floor. Hawk gains control, attacks Meng in the corner before waiting a body slam. He then goes for a top rope splash, but Meng rolls out of the way. The match fills the outside, both men get counted out. A number of WCW wrestlers and officials come out to separate them. Chris?
Really bad. The no selling of a pile driver, why? Like, just really terrible. The double count out. It was thrown together on the main event before, as you spoke earlier about. And for like this 3-minute mess, just leave it off the show altogether. He would have been fine without it. Really poor.
Craig.
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of a surprise bonus match, this is absolute rubbish. I mean, I intrinsically loathe pay-per-view matches that don't have a clean finish. And this is just thrown together at the last minute without a clean finish. So I have a great deal of difficulty in having anything resembling positive thoughts towards this one.
No,
especially when you consider sorry Bobby, especially when you consider the people that are involved.
No, I mean, very, very strange in the sense that, the idea of having the setup before the show was very clever. I didn't really speak about it, but one thing WCW are doing a fair bit of now is, they've got this main event leading, and so they're trying to, as it's on TV, try and use the pre-show essentially to try and hook people in. Road Warrior Hawk was unadvertised, and I think that Bischoff seemed to try to imply that because it was unadvertised, it was all going to be a bit wacky anyway. But yeah, all very strange. I mean, I like certain things about what they've done with Meng in the last few months since they kind of made him an in-ring act rather than just a bodyguard or an enforcer. But they put him in some very odd spots. We had the thing with Duggan at Uncensored, where he was in the martial arts match and really should have just wiped out Duggan with his savate kick at the top. And then we have this match here, and I kind of thought coming into this match the idea was going to be Hawk comes in, Meng beats him up, wins the match. It's a big win for Meng. Hawk can leave and all of that. And then they gave us this, which I suppose suggests we're going to get another match. Isn't necessarily the end of the world. But yeah, this was underwhelming. It wasn't long enough. No, very few positives from this, and a weird one in the sense that I actually think these two could have a semi-decent big man brawl. And they didn't give them the chance. Anyway. We move on to the WCW Hall of Fame induction. Gordon Soley is on hands for the inductions. Going in this year are Chief Wahoo McDaniel, Terry Funk, Dusty Rhodes, Antonio Inoki, Angelo Poffo, and Big John Studd. Dusty, not surprisingly, gets the biggest pop of the night and the closing speech.
First of all, it's a real honor and privilege to be standing out here with these gentlemen that represent this sport for all these years. I want to thank my two children, Teal and Cody, Kristen, and the natural Dustin Rhodes for standing behind me through all of this. My new grandbaby, Dakota, Papa says hello. My mom, my stepdad, Mike in Houston, and my dad who's up there right now with Eddie Graham. I want to thank all of them, and most of all, I want to thank the fans, but because without the fans, this sport does not exist. I also want to thank the most important person in my life, Michelle, my wife, for giving me the choice to chance the rapids, and she left me dare to dance the tide. And in closing, if one thing that these gentlemen up here with me have brought you through the years, it was a tremendous amount of blood, sweat, and tears, and to the new generation that is here now in this great, talented WCW, boys, you better put them on tight and lace them up if you're going to follow in these gentlemen's footsteps right here. God bless you. I love you. Thank you.
And at the end of his ceremony, there's one more inductee. We get the final induction, and it's Gordon Solie himself. Solie looks genuinely shocked, and I was sort of disappointed to find out that he was actually in on this, and the shock was feigned. Craig, what do you think of, well, I suppose, secondly, the Solie bit at the end, but how WCW handled this Hall of Fame thing? I thought it was quite good, if a bit long.
I didn't really have any sort of major problems at all with the WCW Hall of Fame. I expected a dusty finish along the way at one point, but I thought it was fine. If we're going to split hairs, you could probably argue over Big John Studd's induction, but I thought it was absolutely fine. And obviously, Angelo Poffo's inclusion made for very solid storyline. Made for very good reason for in a storyline perspective. I thought it was fine. It went on a little bit too long, as you alluded to, Bob, but I thought it was absolutely fine.
No, I don't think there are many doubts with the cast they've inducted this year in terms of the names. Poffo is probably the most debatable one. As you said, Big John Studd, I suppose, to a point as well. But, you know, with Funk, with Rhodes, Solie's quote-unquote surprise induction, certainly, you know, he's earned his place in there as well. So it was fine. But yeah, I watched through it and I kind of said to myself, yeah, my thoughts on this was, given how they had it work, I think it might be better if they'd have interspersed this throughout the show. So rather than having them all in one big block, just like have between each match kind of have like one induction. So you're not losing, but you're spacing matches out with an induction different time. I don't think that would have been all that bad an idea. Chris, your thoughts?
No, I think that's a good idea, as you just mentioned, spacing it out. I am surprised you say Solie knew about the induction, because I didn't know he was aware, and he deserves an award or something, because that was brilliantly feigned surprise. I just agree with both you guys. Went on a bit too long, but no issues really aside from that. No,
I mean, I only found out Solie knew just because it was what the Observer and the Torch were reporting. So I get the sense that 99.9% of people who watch this certainly didn't know he was in on it. And his reaction certainly looked very legitimate. I guess when you watch it back and you know he already knows, you might say, well, he hankered it in a bit, but watching it without knowing, I thought he did a very good job putting that on. Craig, your thoughts on the Solie induction, that little kind of quote unquote surprise?
I thought it was nice. I mean, I think he would have to be particularly heartless not to believe that Solie deserves a place in any wrestling Hall of Fame, based on my remarks earlier on about Solie being the sort of main, in fact the only highlight of the Legends match. So I mean, I thought it was nice, and you seldom really get moments that you think that's nice in a wrestling pay-per-view. So no, I have no qualms whatsoever with it.
We move on. Sting is backstage with Meiji in Oakland, says very little of note. And we move on to Big Bubba Rogers versus Sting in a lights-out match. They genuinely made no effort to explain what a lights-out match was. My interpretation was it was just kind of a no disqualification, weapons allowed match. Sting certainly came out carrying a table above his head, so I suppose that was a giveaway of something. Bubba mocks Sting's howl, so Sting does it and hypes up the crowd. Sting hits a dropkick, sends Bubba to the outside. Bubba gets back in the ring and chokes Sting with his tie. Sting gets loose and hits another dropkick. Or jumping double kick, I suppose I should say. Bubba slams Sting's head onto the stairs, then gets the table, half unfolds it before Sting cracks Bubba's head onto it. Sting then does a body slam onto the table, which is laid flat on the mat. Sting then props the table up, then shapes to drive Bubba through it, but Bubba throws powder in his eyes. Heenan speculates that Bubba hit Sting so hard, dust came out of him. Table gets propped up in the corner of the ring. Sting goes to splash Bubba into it, but Bubba moves and Sting bounces off of it. Bubba then starts whipping Sting with his belt. Sting hits a splash on the top rope for a 2 count, lays the table on top of Bubba before doing a double stomp, then locks in a scorpion deathlock, and Bubba quits. Craig.
Well, if we can go back in time even further, what was there was a match that we'd covered previously involving The Undertaker, and it involved a stipulation that there was no explanation whatsoever over.
It was Giant Gonzalez, or whatever his name was, at SummerSlam 93.
That's right.
Oh, what was it called? I can't remember. It was something like...
Was it not just like a casket match or something? But there was no No, it wasn't, but there was just no explanation of how you won it. Because even Todd Pettengill beforehand was like, basically, we don't know how you win this match. And I think that that hurts matches like this, because people are going in and being like, well, we don't really know what's happening here. And I mean, Sting's great and Bubba Rogers is fine, but when you've got a stipulation that you struggle to explain or people don't know, then you're always going to be slightly hampered.
Oh, Craig, you did so well, almost stalling. I've almost got there. What was it? Rest in peace match, that was it. Yeah. Rest in peace match.
Yes, that's it. Because nobody knew what that meant, because it was just a thing, and you're like, oh yeah, I mean, that's obviously obvious if
and do you know the best thing about that match? We covered it on this show, so you go back and listen to August 19th.
Nothing is the best thing about that match.
No. The best thing about your point in this match is that the match ends and Vince McMahon says, and we finally know what a rest in peace match is.
Correct.
No,
yes.
we never found out.
No, you're right. No, Vince, we're still bamboozled by the premise of the whole thing.
No idea. Lights out match, I know, because even like me and Gene Okerlund references in the promo, it's like, well, the lights will be out. I think the idea was that, I think me and Gene Okerlund referenced to like looking up to the ceiling really of the arena, and obviously when you're sparked out, your lights go out. I think that was the idea. But yeah, like, very, very odd. And yeah, particularly strange given that, if you were going to call it like a weapons match or a hardcore match or whatever, extreme match or something like that, I don't know, just call it that. A lights out match really made no sense. And I was thinking it might be, some form of four corners match or something like that, or like a match that's in the dark, or, if anything, I'm quite disappointed that WCW, given that this is a company that 2 months ago did a match on the back of a moving truck, I'm quite disappointed that the company came up with the idea of recording a match, a lights out match, and then producing something so uncreative. Like maybe have a match where all of the lights go out and then each wrestler has a torch stuck to their head. That would have been better. It would have been different.
It couldn't have been any worse.
No, that's true. Chris?
I just, I agree totally with both of you about the stipulation. Lights out, I thought it was some kind of last man standing match, like they have to win via knockout and stuff like that, and then it's just sort of a regular no DQ. Just call it that. It would be a lot simpler. The highlight for me was Bobby Heenan saying about the powder, and he said, well, he used to be a cop, so maybe it was from a powdered donut. I thought that was brilliant. It was okay. It was an alright match. It was a little bit boring, a bit slow, but I mean, it wasn't as bad as some of the stuff earlier on the show. So it was okay. Yeah.
No, I mean, I kind of viewed this match as two guys who are both willing to work quite hard. And yeah, they put on a decent showing. Again, this mythical better show that includes this Wright against Anderson and the opener is off to quite a solid start. The problem is that back in the real world, this is the co-main, and we've had nothing better. This was fine. It was certainly in the kind of upper half of matches on this show, but I don't think that says a lot. Craig, your overall thoughts on the match?
I thought it was fine. I mean, it wasn't great, but in fact, for a penultimate match in a pay-per-view, it was pretty poor. As a match itself, not bad, but the idea of this sort of being the second to last match is pretty grim.
And we move on to tonight's main event is Ric Flair and Vader with Arn Anderson versus Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage with Jimmy Hart and the Renegade. After some delay, Renegade comes out seemingly with different music from Uncensored, which would make sense given that I think WWF's legal team has been in contact since that show and has said, can you not use our music please? But anyway, he backs off Ric Flair on the outside. Vader wants Hogan in the ring. Hogan unloads on Vader in the corner, then lays him out with a clothesline and sends him over the top rope. You will note, no disqualification. Vader regroups on the outside, but Savage hits a double axe handle from the top. Hogan and Savage go double team Vader, but Vader lays them both out and then poses in the ring. Vader dumps Savage to the outside. Flair drops out to follow him and dumps him over the guardrail into the crowd. Flair does his customary flip over the turnbuckle, walks right into a big boot from Hogan, then staggers to the outside, doing the customary Flair collapse halfway up the R-way. Hogan returns into the ring, but Savage dumps him back to the outside. Flair chops Hogan in the corner, but Hogan no-sells it, then backdrops Flair. Hogan picks Flair up off the turnbuckle and dumps him in the ring before locking in a figure four leg lock of his own. Vader distracts the referee and Arn Anderson comes to the ring and cradles Hogan. Anderson feels the wrath of the Renegade for that. Flair has control and tags in Vader. Vader logs in the figure four leg lock on Hogan. We cut to the R-way, and a man with long hair and shades is by the screens. This is, well, presumably Paul White. They didn't do a very good job selling his height, it should be said, if he is 7'2". Vader suplexes Hogan, then Hogan pops up. Vader just runs him over. Vader gets angry with the referee, so just lays him out. Referee Randy Anderson gets up rather quickly. Vader squashes Hogan in the corner, then hits a Vader bomb, then goes for a Vader bomb from the top rope, but Hogan rolls out of the way. Flair and Savage get involved. Savage unloads on Flair, but runs into a back elbow. Savage goes for an elbow drop from the top rope, hits it, but Arn pulls him out of the ring. Arn lays out Savage. Renegade lays into Arn, then Renegade squares off against Vader. Flair calls for the moonsault from Vader, who hits a very snug moonsault to Savage. Hogan comes out to drag Flair off, but it seems like Savage kicks out anyway. Hogan gets in the ring with Flair, who begs off, goes for a 10 punch for inviting Vader into the ring. Hogan then hits a body slam on Vader, which got a quite nice pop. Then knocks Arn off the apron, hits a big boot, then goes for a leg drop, but Anderson grabs Hogan's leg. Vader splashes Hogan. Flair pins him, but Hogan kicks out. Savage goes after Vader on the outside, and Hogan hulks up in the ring. Anderson jumps up to the top rope, does a double axe handle, but Hogan moves out of the way and Flair eats it. Hogan drops the leg and gets the 3 count. We will come to the post-match action in a minute. Craig, your thoughts?
It was okay. I mean, I think by this stage in this event, I'd lost a little bit of interest. They started with talking about legends of today, tomorrow, and the future, and you just look at the whole event, and it screams the 80s. Everything just seems a little bit slow, and that's probably the best way to describe this main event.
Chris?
There's something I don't like about pay-per-view main events when there's nothing on the line. So, like, no matter what happens in this match, Hogan's still going to be the champion, so what reason do I have to really care about the action? And, like, it was fine, the match was fine, but not a pay-per-view main event. Like, really just not good enough for that level at all. It was okay, a really, like, predictable finish. Oh, look, Hogan has been Flair again. It was, like, great. I don't know. I didn't. It was okay as a match, but not like if you've spent money for this pay-per-view, I feel like you're going to be very disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, speaking back on your point, Chris, in terms of, you know, why did the babyfaces win? It was a tag match with nothing on the line. We're talking about the next 2 pay-per-views are going to be headlined by, you know, Flair against Savage next month because Hogan's having a month off, and then in July it's going to be Hogan and Vader, presumably for one last time. Why? I don't know why the heels couldn't have won this one. You know, we ended up, and we'll come to the post-match angle where the heels do try and regain some of their heat. But just all very strange. And Chris, as you say, it's Hogan pinning Flair. We are 6 months removed from their match at Halloween Havoc, and it's the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why the heels didn't win this one is just because Hulk Hogan is pretty, like, that's all the reason you need, really. Like, just at one point, Flair gets, like, a decent amount of offense in, and you think, oh, here's something new, and then, oh no, don't worry, Hogan starts beating him up pretty quickly. Like, just in case you were scared we were going to try something new. We're not. Hogan is going to win. It's fine. It was I don't. Boring. Really boring.
All very unsatisfying. Craig, any further thoughts?
No, I mean, I think Chris is absolutely spot on. The idea of there being nothing to play for, so you're left wondering what's the point.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was one of those things. I mean, a match with this amount of star power always had a bit more, in terms of, there's an argument to say it was the best match on the card, which probably says more about the card than it does about the quality of this match. But just in terms of, because you've got 4 big names in the ring, it was Flair's first pay-per-view match. He wrestled on TV before and ultimately did wrestle a show in Korea, actually. But yeah, Flair was in this match. You got Vader, you got Hogan, you got Savage, you got Renegade and Anderson on the outside. To give them credit, there was always something happening in this match, a bit like the Uncensored as well, a bit similar to that. We had Hogan and Vader in the strap match, and then everything going on the outside. That they achieved that from that point of view. But yeah, Chris, I think you're right. The action wasn't great, and the result didn't matter, and so it just fell a bit flat. But obviously the heels have to, try and regain some of their heat. So after the bell, the heels attack Savage. Angelo Poffo gets in the ring, but heels start attacking him as well. Flair locks in the figure of 4 on Angelo. Renegade and Hogan run off the heels. Savage is distraught and ultimately calls for an ambulance, which, given that Poffo only subjected to the figure 4, was probably a bit excessive. Craig, as attempt to go for the heels to get their heat back, was this effective?
Yeah, I mean, it tried to sort of salvage something from it, but I mean, I think the whole damage was done by the idea of the Dubés winning a nothing match with nothing on the line. So it was different. It's difficult to salvage anything from this.
Chris,
I mean, the angle was fine, but as Craig said, it doesn't make up for the finish of the match. Like, it didn't. You could have had this finish if the heels win and then the beatdown continues and Angelo Poffo runs it in the ring and then they attack him as well, and that's how the show goes off, and then you've really set up some feuds and you've got something new. The heels have won. But how many times is this in the last year that Hogan's pinned Flair clean on a pay-per-view? Is it the 3rd time?
Bash at the Beach, Havoc, Uncensored, and this one 4.
So 4 times. And
bear in mind, Flair wasn't in one of those matches.
And there's a big old gap as well between a few of them. So 4 times. And because of that, really, the angle fell flat for me. Because by that point, you'd lost me. It weren't going to salve, in my mind at least.
There are people who are listening and are being picky. No, he didn't pin him at Uncensored. I suppose he did just drag him to all 4 corners. But given that Flair wasn't in the match, I think the point does still stand.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's, ultimately, I just don't think we need any more of Flair and Hogan. I kind of hope that's the end for a while. It's not they're both over characters. They're both really good to watch in their own unique ways. But we've done it now. And alright, they needed to use Hogan as a fool to get Flair back in the ring, but I'm kind of hoping that we don't see anything of Flair and Hogan for a long time now. I think they've burnt all of the equity they had in that match. And alright, I say burnt, they squeezed all of the life out of it, but they could have set up for a potential rematch down the line had they have brought Flair back in a different way. But given the way they've done it, I don't think there's any equity in Flair versus Hogan anytime the next year. And yeah, ultimately, it does seem like they are shaping towards Flair and Savage. So, it's the main event next month, so I suppose there is that. Chris, your overall thoughts on this show and a score rating out of 10?
It's difficult, really, because especially since we've been talking it through, maybe I feel like I've been a bit harsh, but as a pay-per-view, a 3 out of 10, and I think that's quite generous, but maybe it's sort of like a standalone show, to go and watch back. Maybe it's a 5 out of 10 show, but I just feel like for this to be a pay-per-view, it's really bad, so I'm going to stick with a 3, and I feel like that's a generous 3.
Craig?
I'm with Chris. This was an atrocious show. First, it might lead on to bigger and better things. As a standalone show, this was pretty bad. In fact, it was very, very bad. So I think a generous 3 out of 10 from me.
No, I gave it 3.5. You could put together a very good Clash of the Champions if you picked 4 matches from the show. But the fact you're asking people to pay for it, and those 3 matches after, because I actually thought the opener was one of the better, might have been the best match of the night in some ways. Again, it was a very odd competition for match of the night in that nobody was really competing. But no, just those 3 matches in the middle were just awful. I mean, just really bad. We've got baby faces that aren't doing basic baby face stuff. Like, for all the critique of Jim Duggan, I come back to him. For all the critique of Duggan, he does the basics quite well. And so at least with Duggan, he's going to whip the crowd up. He's going to have a Duggan match. It'll be 2 stars. It won't be that long, and all of the above. It just didn't work. Yeah, I think 3.5. In terms of what I would recommend to go back and watch, in some ways I would say nothing. You miss nothing from this show. But if you've got some time in your hands and you're thinking, I want to watch this show, I would cut out those 3 really bad matches in the middle. The rest of it's fine without being any better than good, I would say ultimately. But again, like Craig, me and you've done some of these shows where we've had bad WCW shows with horrendous booking. And if there's one thing to say about this, I thought they got their big calls right. This, alright, maybe the heels should have won the main event. But we left with a very good reason to heat up Flair and Savage. We had the Nasty Boys finally win the tag titles, and we had a very good development of Anderson and Alex Wright. So I think from a logistical standpoint, Craig, I think they get a bit more of a pass than we perhaps might think.
Yeah, no, I think so, but you can counter that, Bob, by the idea that we also got into the stage that we were getting away from what were considered dusty finishes to matches, and it almost seems like we've ditched the dusty finishes, but we're still feeling unsatisfied by the end product.
Yeah, it's almost like I wonder if on previous shows I've said this would be a decent show without the crap finishes. I get the feeling we've seen that show without the crap finishes, and it turns out it's not that good.
Yeah, absolutely.
World Television champ Arn Anderson is a magician last weekend at Slamboree, pulling another one out of the hat as you continue to do here at World Championship Wrestling. Later on in the program, the Slim Jim Challenge, sponsors of the Bash at the Beach. We're going to find out who you're going to be fending against this coming summer.
Just like Alex Wright found out, just like Tim Horner just found out, Gene Okerlund, I am the greatest world television champion of all time. 2 great athletes, but just too little, too late.
Sometimes, Arn Anderson, I get the feeling that it's nipping right at your heels, and you may be running out of time very shortly.
Gene Okerlund, the big wigs at Slim Jim have found out what I've known for a long time. This belt is my manhood. I feel like I am the greatest champion in WCW. Hulk Hogan, he may go out and defend his belt once a month. I defend this sometimes 2 or 3 times a weekend. This is the most defended belt in WCW.
Why get on Hogan's case? You've got other battles and mountains to climb.
The fact is, whoever wins this Slim Jim tournament, and they want to bring it to Bash at the Beach, understand one thing. You're going to have to rip into my guts and rip into my soul to take this away from me. This is what I live for.
The Saturday night after Slamboree on May 27th sees WCW go on location in North Carolina, specifically at Speed Street for a NASCAR crossover event. They're outside and it's raining. The Nasty Boys win a squash match, then reaffirm their challenge to the Blue Bloods at the Great American Bash. Back at centre stage, they've decked out the ring in Slim Jim branding. Mean Gene Okerlund is pushing a story for his hotline, saying that they're negotiating with a big Ultimate Fighter, which, while true, is somewhat misleading as they're trying to get Dan Severn in for a show they're doing in Asia later this year. In North Carolina, the rain seems to have relented and we're watching the Slim Jim Challenge, a 4-man tournament for the right to face Arn Anderson for the TV title. Jim Duggan faces Paul Orndorff. The match spills to the outside where Duggan rams Orndorff's head onto the Hulk Hogan NASCAR painted at ringside. In the end, Orndorff wins with a handful of tights. Randy Savage defeats Stunning Steve Austin in a US title tournament match. Austin goes for a top rope headbutt, but Savage moves, then hits a top rope elbow drop of his own for the win. In the Slim Jim Challenge, Brian Pillman defeats Big Bubba in the other semi-final. Bubba struck the referee, Pillman does a bridge with a pin, and the referee has little hesitation with a fast count. Darren Dallas Page is out doing a gimmick now where whenever he does a move he holds up a 10 sign like he's judging a gymnastics competition. At the end of the match, the Diamond Doll holds up a 10 plus sign. Paul Orndorff wins the final of the Slim Jim Challenge, beating Brian Pillman by using the trunks. In the main event, Ric Flair against Alex Wright went to an apparent no contest after Randy Savage stormed the ring. Savage and Flair had to be separated by a series of WCW wrestlers. Savage confronts Alex Wright and he says that this is not his battle, and Savage had no choice after what Flair did to his dad at the pay-per-view. Flair, apparently it seems, advances in the tournament.
Finally, I get my opportunity to do the interview with Diamond Dallas that I tried to get earlier in the golf course. You blew me off then. I want to know now, what's up with the card? What did the card say? Kimberly.
Well, what are you doing talking to her? The interview's with me. It's all about Diamond Dallas Page. I'm setting out a warning to all the World Championship Wrestling wannabe superstars. I'm letting you know right now that Diamond Dallas Page is rolling, Daddy. And if you don't believe me, ask that chump I just rolled right over. Shut up without talking.
Stop it right here. I want to know. $13 million. I wanted to know, first of all, I don't believe a word you said about how you won the money.
I don't care what you believe.
And what does she get out of it?
I don't care what she gets out of it. It's all about Diamond Dallas Page. I won $13 million. I'm the one driving the Lamborghini. I'm the one wearing the diamonds. I'm the one wearing the
gold. How do you feel about that, Kim?
I'm not going to tell you again. Stop interviewing her when it's my time. The warning's out. Anybody that can get Diamond Dallas Page's way, come on down, Daddy. I'm begging somebody out there. Stop me!
After looking at your golf game on videotape, I'd say there's a number of people that can stop you on the golf course.
Does that look like golfing? First of all, bish quick. I shot.
Bish off, thank you.
Whatever. Shut up! Give me a microphone. The bottom line is this. I shot a 62 golfing. There's nobody can beat me in golfing. Blackjack, trap, no. You better shut up when I talk. It's all about Diamond Dallas Page.
I'm sorry. We are out of time, and your money won't buy you another 30 seconds. We'll be back right after this.
And we come back, and we're going to start with looking at the final WCW Saturday night of the month. Nothing especially remarkable, and on another month with fewer volumes of shows, we perhaps wouldn't have covered this, but given that we've got a WCW own section, I think we might as well. The reason this show is significant, one, it's the follow-up to Slamboree, and two, because part of the show is filmed outside. They're at the whatever I ended up saying in the TV review. They're in North Carolina on Speed Street. I think they're doing some NASCAR crossover stuff. So some of the stuff is shot outside on location. A real crowd, which is a very big difference maker for WCW. Rain as well, which is another interesting factor. And there was no canopy; they just went with it. And then we had some stuff back at Center Stage in Florida as well. Chris, I know you've seen this show. We won't spend too long on it, but I will pick up on a couple of points. Just your overall thoughts on the outdoor vibe. I know you've not seen much WCW TV, so perhaps nothing to compare it to. But what do you think?
No, it definitely, like, in terms of just watching a lot of wrestling, it made it stand out. It was quite good. The crowd felt loud, just naturally through being outside, and it just had a different vibe to it. It was more exciting. It made it just, for me at least, it stood out more than just sort of your average weekly wrestling show. Like, the action wasn't especially great or memorable, but just in itself, the fact it was outside for the most part was quite, it was good. Yeah.
It was noteworthy. I mean, it's the kind of thing that I don't get the sense that at the end of the year I'm going to be remembering many WCW Saturday nights because they all look the same, they all feel the same, and generally it's got a lot better, but generally not a ton happens week to week, and when it does, it's all quite similar, but it stood out in that sense. And again, I thought they did stuff quite well. Yeah, we had the Nasty Boys win a squash match and it's kind of raining and they're just using that as part of their thing. We had the Slim Jim Challenge tournament, the 4-man tournament, all that kind of stuff. To touch on a couple of things. Firstly, Diamond Dallas Page. I don't know if both of you, Craig, you've seen this. The Diamond Dallas Page playing golf segment. Or have you seen it?
I haven't.
My mistake. Chris, have you seen this bit?
No.
Mine too. All right. Well, afternoon then. All right. Yes. Basically, earlier in the month we have Diamond Dallas, the Diamond Doll, Max Muscle, and Eric Bischoff, and they're on a golf course. I don't really know why, but Eric Bischoff's there and he wants some comments. Anyway, I cover it in the thing. If you can find the clip, it is on our Facebook page. It is quite good. It's a quite interesting watch just because it is WCW again doing something different. But Chris, coming back to the Diamond Dallas stuff on the TV, I like what they're doing with him. I like the idea that he's in money, but for once he's a guy with a lot of money, but nobody's really asking where it came from. I guess that's not unique, but it's certainly different. Generally, when we have wealthy characters, they kind of have a backstory. And I like the small little thing. It's one of those things where a year down the line, they might have fleshed out this character a bit. I like the fact that he's protective of the Diamond Doll, but Bischoff is quite keen to find out more about her, and we've got that dynamic going on. What do you think of DDP, Chris?
I really enjoyed the promo after the match. Was like right in front of the fans who like going crazy, and he was really playing up to them, like, and telling them to shut up. Bischoff, yeah, as you say, trying to get an interview with the Diamond Doll, and he didn't like that at all. I thought it was really good, and in the end he stole the mic and just really like nice character development away from stars of the 80s. Like it's refreshing to say the least.
Yeah. Again, it's just something different. I like the team they've got, and as I say, just the stuff I mentioned in the TV review as well, when I recorded that earlier, in terms of, he goes and he bought them all cars and that kind of thing. It's all small stuff. I mean, there's the thing knocking about with Dave Sullivan. It may have happened on WCW Pro, but they certainly don't seem to have developed that storyline much. But that I assume pays off. They mentioned that Dave Sullivan thing enough this month where I'm guessing we'll get a blow-off match for that. But yeah, I like what DDP's doing. A couple of other things, Chris, I guess first of all as well will be Randy Savage against Sonic Steve Austin. What do you think about that? Quite brief, and it will tie into sort of tie into what we're going to discuss in a minute. But an intriguing match.
Sure, I don't want to touch on it too much because, as you say, we'll cover it a bit closer later in the show. But it was, I think I expected more from it.
It was very long.
No, and that's probably, I think they made the most of the time they had, I suppose, but just going into it, like, I knew that that match was on the show, and I was like, looking forward to that one, and it wasn't particularly noteworthy, very forgettable, but a lot of that is to do with
what we're going to
time allowance and things like that, so, but it was okay, it wasn't a bad match at all.
No, just short. And again, when we come to the Austin walkout thing in a minute, that may well tie into it a bit. And the final one is the Flair and Alex Wright and the ultimate finish. An interesting story, I may have mentioned this in the TV report, I recorded it earlier today, is that Flair booked himself, he's the head booker, did book himself to beat Alex Wright's and end his undefeated streak. Now, admittedly, given when it aired, I suppose this actually doesn't make sense, given that the Flair Wright win would have been taped before Slamboree would have aired after, so technically Flair wouldn't have been ending his run. But Flair did book himself to win the match, and they did tape it where Flair won the match cleanly with a figure 4 leg lock and Wright submitted. And apparently Flair felt so bad about that they retaped it and they had this DQ finish. I've got to be honest, Chris, I actually kind of think this was a good move, given what they ended up doing with Savage and the bit with the Savage promo that I'll probably have either played or will play between this and the bit we do with the Austin thing. The Savage promo and all that led into that, I think they got the best of that.
See, I don't know what it is, but between Slamboree and this show, I really like Alex Wright. I thought it was a really good match. I really like him. He's one of probably my favourite people, that's on WCW TV at this time. And, so when the finish happened, and then the promo, like with Savage running in and sort of attacking Wright just to get to Flair, and like I get that with the angle that ended Slamboree, and then Savage cutting the promo and just sort of says like, sorry, my issue isn't with you, it's with Flair. Like, you love your dad, you'd have done the same thing. And Alex Wright just sort of murmurs like, yeah, it's okay. Like, I didn't really like that at all. I felt bad for the guy. I thought, well, no, be a bit riled up. Like, have a go at him. Like, he's just cost you. You're matching the tournament. This is a big deal. Like, I don't know. I did. That was probably the most invested I've been watching WCW ever, was this little angle. I really didn't like it.
Yeah, no, fair to all of the above. I think it's just, I guess it's just the fact that Wright is where he is on the WCW totem pole and Savage is so much higher up it, that I guess. But yeah, no, you're right. You make some very good points. I do agree with Wright. Alright, it's gonna be easier for him to look good in a pair of matches against Arn Anderson and Ric Flair than it is, say, if he's wrestling Paul Roma, as we went through in great depth in February, or if he's wrestling someone like, I was going to say Johnny Barr, but he wouldn't wrestle him. Just, Jean-Paul Levesque when they did that match in December, or that kind of thing. If you're in the ring with guys of this experience, you're gonna have a good match. And the story they told, it did put sympathy on Wright, I suppose. But yeah, no, I thought it was another good match, 2 for 2 for Wright this month. And I will say on the Savage thing, I think I wasn't quite as, not confused, but I didn't have quite so much of a problem with Wright kind of letting it go, in that, I guess if you're Alex Wright, not they thought about this daily, but if you're Alex Wright and Randy Savage comes out and interferes in your business, it's like, okay, I'm going to let Savage go rather than doing anything else. But yeah.
All right, Brain, that is the case. Yes, Alex Wright unfortunately was disqualified.
I'll give you the bottom line right now. You're going to have plenty of days in the sun. You're a German rookie phenom. But he is not your day. Only because priority one for me is to take the nature boy out. Understand that? If you don't understand, you got a problem with me. You're a second generation wrestler. You love your dad? Yeah. All right. Nature boy crossed the line. He messed with my dad. Now I gotta take him. And it's my responsibility to do that. You got a problem with that? You got a problem with me? You tell me right now.
No, I don't got a problem, Randy. If somebody would do that to my father like Ric Flair did to your father, I would do the same way. Because I love my father like you love your father. And I got no problem. I understand him.
Randy, you'll get your shot next week here against Flair in the tournament.
Flair has got a problem with me. I got a problem with you. Respect, RESBGT. You got none for me. I got none for you. Next week, I'm going to take you all the way out. Done with Nature Boy. No more. You're not going to make it to the Great American Bash. I got your number. And don't buy any Run Right bananas because you ain't going to eat them. You're out of here.
And that will all occur in 1 week.
Stunning Steve Austin was involved in a walkout at WCW television this month after refusing to job to Warrior knock off the Renegade, although it doesn't seem to have resulted in any long-term effects for him. He would, at tapings a couple of days later, end up doing the job for the Renegade after all, in return seemingly for reassurances for the reformation of the Hollywood Blondes. The story is the latest in a much bigger power play story between those who are in Hulk Hogan circles and those who were part of the company before he arrived. People like Austin, Brian Pillman, Lord Steven Regal, Johnny B. Bad and others are seen as representative of wrestlers who have been around too long and, given WCW's financial issues, cost too much money relative to their position. Ric Flair, as head booker, by choice or otherwise, seems to be the man fighting their corner. On the other side of the coin is the generation of talent who have come in since Hulk Hogan has arrived. People like The Butcher, Avalanche and Hacksaw Jim Duggan have all seemingly come in and taken the spots of the previously mentioned undercard wrestlers. While Rick Wilson, the man who plays the Renegade, has no history with Hogan, his role as the fake Ultimate Warrior puts him firmly in the Hogan camp. Look out for Paul White, who debuted this month at Slamboree, as the replacement for Andre the Giant in a similar type of position. The specifics of the Austin story are pretty much as they sound. He arrived at tapings and was scheduled to lose cleanly to Renegade on television. Renegade is being built up to face Arn Anderson at the Great American Bash next month and win the television title. In a sidebar to this, it's said that Alex Wright losing his undefeated streak to Anderson at Slamboree was a sign of Hogan using his leverage to get Renegade into the championship picture. For what it's worth, Flair felt so bad about ending Wright's streak himself at a TV taping prior, he redid the match and had Wright lose by disqualification. Austin eventually walked out of the taping the same day, but what's more perplexing is that nobody was really sure who the person was who made the call for Austin to lose. The book was passed around and eventually onto head booker Ric Flair, who, in theory at least, was in North Korea, although a consultation of the calendar would have shown that Flair could and should have been at the tapings that day. Flair eventually returned and set about trying to talk Austin into doing the job. Anything else would have been a massive dent in Flair's already diminishing powers as booker. Austin, at that stage, still didn't budge, so his place was taken in the match by Tex Slazenger. He and Renegade proceeded to have a match reportedly so bad that it won't air. Some call it the worst match in WCW history. It was only a couple of days later that Austin was eventually convinced to do the job to Renegade and to Randy Savage. It's said that in exchange he had reassurances that the Hollywood Blondes will be reformed.
And for our final discussion topic of the month, we'll bring Craig back in. Craig, let's talk this Steve Austin story. Well, Stewart wrapped it up quite nicely in the audio, so I won't really repeat what he said. What do you think?
It's not a massive surprise that Steve Austin's taken the stance that he has. I mean, you look at WCW in the 95 period, and it is sort of trying to replicate the WWF of the 80s. So he's clearly not happy with the direction of travel and takes a very principled stand. I mean, in terms of how that is for WCW as a business, it's not going to be great for them because he's one of their very obvious up-and-coming talents. But from his perspective, then you can't really blame him.
No, I mean, the interesting thing, and thinking about it, I don't think I put this in the script for Stewart, so I'll fill in this bit of information, is that last month and there are wider WCW financial issues going on right now, in terms of they are looking to cut costs. We go back to the thing with Dustin Rhodes a couple of months back and all that. And they did mention the fact a couple of months ago that they might be looking to cut some of the wage bills, and that Steve Austin was one of the higher paid guys in the company, and that, you know, his might be a salary that they might look to cut in terms of he's a guy that's getting paid quite a lot but isn't particularly in the plans. So there's all of that going on as well. But yeah, no, it's a strange one in the sense that, and I know neither of you guys will have seen much WCW. You certainly won't see the volume of WCW TV that I've seen, but we don't often get recognised guy versus recognised guy matches on WCW television. And Chris, invariably when we do, it's some form of screwy finish. So it's less that they're asking Austin to do the job for me. It's more that anyone's doing the job.
Yeah, it's just a culmination of frustration with sort of previous booking and like lack of direction, and then probably been offered like certain creative plans and they've never really come to fruition, and then to sort of be relegated to this like jobber role, like, well, we got plans for this guy, so we're just going to use you to lose to him on free TV. Like,
particularly as it's Renegade, I don't get the sense if he'd have turned up and they said you're losing to Randy Savage clean, I don't think he'd have been all that bothered. Maybe, you know, as I say, more the fact that, you know, people don't generally lose clean when it's established guy versus established guy. But I think if you went to him and said, yeah, here's Rick Wilson, you're losing to him, I can understand why he might be going, yeah, no, I'm not.
Yeah, I've sort of utmost sympathy with Austin in this situation. Like, feel like he's acting completely reasonably, really.
Yeah, I mean, you look at you look at Austin over the last kind of 6 months, and this probably, well, maybe a bit longer. This goes back to when he first got beaten by Jim Duggan at, I think, Full Brawl. And the one thing about Austin, and not much of this has seen the light of day on television, is that there's always talk in the Observer and in the Torch that Austin is going to be putting something new. There were talks of putting him in the new Four Horsemen a couple of months back. There were talks of putting him with Harley Race. I think they did do that, and then they split it off because Austin got injured. They were going to put him with Sensuous Sherry, and then they paired her with Harlem Heat instead. You know, reforming the Hollywood Blondes, that thing's off and on again. Brian Pillman similarly has the thing where every month he seems to be lined up for something different and nothing goes anywhere. And it's like, you can understand why he might be getting more and more frustrated. Not that he's a guy who, because, you know, if you're a guy at the bottom end of the roster, just a guy who's just there, I can't think of a great example of that, maybe a Johnny B. Bad type, maybe you'd be happier, but I think it's almost kind of like the hope that's killing him, and the hope that, oh, maybe this is going to be my time, and then he gets in, it's like, oh, you're losing the Renegade. And that will bring to a conclusion this month's show. We are fighting some technical gremlins, so we will wrap this up a little more hastily than usual. Firstly, Chris White. Chris, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Chris, you are on Twitter.
Yeah, Chris White 14.
That will be that. And you've just celebrated Arsenal winning the cup final today.
Yeah.
So you're in fairly good spirits.
Great day all round.
Not too bad at all. Nice 4-0 win for those looking for some slightly. Well, actually, technically, if we're in 20 years ago mode, Everton won the cup this year. I looked that up earlier. So yes, technically you didn't. And Craig Wilson. Craig, we had a bit of a catch up before the start of the show. Craig, thank you very much for coming back in. It's been a while.
It's been far too long, Bob. It's nice to be back. I think this is the first time I've been back since maybe late 1993.
No, you did a couple of shows 94 because you did Spring Stampede, that like excellent WCW show. And in many ways you picked a good time to drop out because it's not got as good as that since. Yes. And then you came back in on a proper low, a real big low. But as
looking forward to coming back on the 1995 Survivor Series, which is equal parts low, equal parts cult classic.
Excellent. Well, so I'm hoping to get you into back into the roster a bit more. But in as much or as little detail as you're happy to discuss in public, tell us where you've been.
Yeah, well, really just sort of, I worked during the referendum campaign, so that sort of took up the referendum campaign, obviously, for Scottish independence on the no side, so that took up a lot of time and has alienated 50% instantly of your Scottish listeners. And so back now and looking forward to watching what is a really rubbish year of wrestling, generally, in 1995.
Yeah, it's because that's the thing, like, it's gonna get worse. Because like WWF doesn't start all that badly. I don't recall Super Bowl being a horrendous show either, in the sense that the main event's quite good. But it does look like everything's just heading downwards, with the exception of ECW, which continues to kind of prop up the entertainment value of doing all this. But yes, it is good to, as I said, we've got King of the Ring next month, which I'm deliriously looking forward to, and an X number of WWF shows for the rest of this year. Craig, you have, well, I haven't really spoken to you since last year, so you've got other wrestling commitments. I know you've got your blog that you still do.
That is all.
That is it.
That is it at the moment. It's ringthedamnbell.blogs. Oh, sorry.
You screwed up your own plug, Craig. I mean, I'm going to leave this in, but go again.
Oh, awful. Sorry.
You're rusty. That's your excuse.
Mick Foley would hate me. It's ringthedamnbell.wordpress.com. It's basically a blog dedicated to 80s, 90s, early noughties wrestling, sort of basically the time that I grew up. Me and my circle of friends grew up watching wrestling, and the idea that those were the halcyon days. Whether or not they are is a discussion to be had further down the line, but in terms of where we are, it was a time that we watched the wrestling, and I like Survivor Series when it starts with 20-man tag teams. I like WWF when it contains sort of swerveaholic stuff from Vince Russo. So it's a blog dedicated absolutely to that.
Yeah, and I did recall one blog a few weeks ago. I don't think you wrote it, but it was about Matt Bourne of all people, aka Doink the Clown, aka Born Again in ECW, and that there's one of your guys wrote a kind of a piece on that Born Again character that appeared in ECW for maybe 6 weeks. You can listen to me and Dale discussing that on the ECW parts of shows. I think it's October, November '94. I want to say. So there's a blog on Ring the Damn Bell about that and just about where that went, or also where it didn't go. Ultimately, Bourne, I think, just ended up taking a different date with a different promotion one night. We never saw him again. But that was another example of an ECW character that never really got famous, but perhaps could have, given his former ties and what they were trying to do with it.
And definitely should have.
Yes. No, I agree. No, it was very, very entertaining for while it lasted, but just didn't last very long and never really got the opportunity to go anywhere. Craig, plug, you got the blog's got a Twitter account and your own Twitter account and where people can find you.
Yeah, of course. It's ringthedamnbell.wordpress.com. This time around I've got that right, and it's ringthedamnbell and that the last L is a 1 at twitter.com. So it's all sort of quite retro banter, but it's good, clean family entertainment.
Yeah, if you listen to the show podcast quite regularly, that kind of content is going to be of interest to you, so I do urge you to check that out. Also, plugging on our end, you can find me at Bobby Bamber. It seems to be more politics these days than wrestling. I think that's just an indication of what modern day stuff I'm watching, i.e. not very much. At Wrestling20YRS on Twitter, Wrestling20YRS on Facebook. We're on iTunes, rating and review and all that stuff, RSS feed. It's all on the website, Wrestling20YRS.com. Got an email newsletter that we send out now once a month. That comes just, as I say, no spam on that. I don't know how to do it. So yeah, you can get reminders about new podcasts. We'll be going out probably tomorrow, to your inbox. And that will do that. So obviously if you're listening to this first, as you perhaps should be, given that it's volume 1, volume 2, you've got some WWF stuff to look forward to. That's a slightly better show than this, although certainly not anything great to write home about. You've at least got Bret Hart and Akushi to prop up that end. Then ECW.
That's wonderful.
Yes. That certainly is. And then ECW, it's a quietish month for ECW, but me, Dale and Chris managed to get about 90 minutes out of it anyway, somehow. But anyway, that will wrap up this month's show. We're back in June. King of the Ring. So looking forward to this. I heard so much about it. One of those things, I've heard so much negativity about it, I've got a funny feeling I might enjoy it. Just in a really weird sense. Either that or it is just so bad. But yes, that's an interesting one. That most of these shows I don't go in with much kind of preemptive knowledge one way or another. But we will find out. Anyway, that will wrap up this month's show. I've been Bob Bamber. He's been Craig Wilson. He's been Chris White. And until next time, goodbye.